Welcome to this first video on the Sustainable Performance Framework from TAP Solutions. In these short videos, we're going to be exploring the different facets and components of the framework. To support me with this, I have the CEO of TAP Solutions, Andi Ryland, who's going to talk us through the facets and the components. Welcome, Anthony.
Hi, good to be here.
Thank you for being here. So we're going to go through each video one by one. The focus for this video is building foundations of well-being. Could you tell us what this facet is truly about?
Yeah, Andy, I totally will. And welcome everyone to the Sustainable Performance Model. We start in this first video looking at the building foundations of well-being, because that's where sustainable performance starts. If we're going to have high performance in our organizations over the long term, what we need to have is we need to have great foundations of a workplace culture where people can come and be the best version of themselves. So the first three components that come into this facet are outside work well-being, inside work well-being, and psychological safety. And it's really interesting, first of all, to think that actually two of the 12 components in the sustainable performance model are around well-being. And that's so a sixth of the whole model is about how we can make ourselves ready to be available in the workplace to be our best selves. So outside work well-being, this is all about recovery between work shifts. So when we finish work one day, how do we recover and make sure that our body battery is full when we go into work the next day? So it's about making sure we're fit and ready and energized for work. Inside work well-being is as we're going through the daily grind of work, how do we stay on top of it? How do we stay in a place where we're coping with workload and we're not feeling that sense of overwhelm that sometimes we can when too much is coming at us and we haven't got those practices where we can defend ourselves against a fear of burnout. And then the third area, psychological safety, this one is about being able to bring your best self to work. So when I come to work, if I can be me inside of work and I feel psychologically safe, then I can say those thoughts that are really inside of me and I don't feel I have to be defensive or wary of what's going on. So they're the three components of this first facet, building foundations of well-being.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And I'm curious, why in your mind, from your research, do you see building foundations of well-being as being so important?
Yeah, well, I think it's that word sustainable. And I think we talk about performance in organizations quite a lot. And I think it's almost like a house of cards. If you don't have a great foundation, you pull one of those cards out of the bottom, the whole lot comes down. And to me, if you want to create a great, healthy workplace culture, and to me, thinking about well-being and healthy workplace cultures, they're kind of interchangeable terms. If you want to create that, then you need to look at these three areas. And quite often we rush straight to the thought of burnout and how to prevent burnout, which is the inside of work well-being one. But we almost forget that first one. And as organizations, we don't think we have a responsibility for it. But I think there is a responsibility for organizations to help people understand that recovering between different work shifts is actually as important as annual leave. And in fact, there's research that's been done. They're saying the effects of having a week off dissipate within 2 to 3 weeks of you returning. And it's the recovery between one work shift and the next work shift that actually makes you in such a healthy place for when you're going to work. And there's emotional and a mental impact of that, but there's also the physical impact of that as well. So for organizations, we can actually help people reduce sickness and be at work better there. And then, of course, the psychological safety, that's super important because, as I was saying, if you feel like you can't be your real self and you share your real thinking, then actually there's going to be ideas that are hidden. There's going to be things that aren't said. There's going to be cases where decisions are made, but people don't feel that they're part of it because they couldn't say what they really wanted. So there's so much here about if you want 100% effort from people and if you want them to share their real thoughts, you've got to think about the building the foundations of well-being as an important place when thinking about performance.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anthony. And for listeners listening into this first video around building foundations of well-being, what would be some practical tips or ideas that could help them improve in this area, this facet?
Yeah, and I think there's two ways to look at it. You might be a listener who's a leader in an organization, a line manager or a senior leader. And for me, if you're thinking about the foundations of well-being, you need to think about actually, I need to create environments. It's very hard to just make people feel like safe in the workplace or have great well-being. But actually, if you create the environment where people can have the latitude to actually build themselves into these areas, I think that's the way forward. And some of that then comes from role modeling. If you're a leader who sends emails at 10 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, at weekends, and expect immediate answers, then you're not encouraging people to have that safe space in between work shifts where they can recover. They always think that they're always on. And there's the border between work and non-work is very important for us to allow people to recover. There's things like there's models like the job demands resources model, which actually says we need to balance the demands of the role with the resources we have available to do it. And that's how we cope within high pressure jobs. And I think as a leader, we need to think about what resources can I help provide for an employee. But I think as an employee, you need to do a self-assessment really and think, well, actually, what's going on in my world at the moment? Why am I feeling overwhelmed? And think about this concept of the level of demand and the resources you have. And that even flips outside of work as well. If you're finding you're not recovering well outside of work, what are the demands that's going on in your personal life compared to the resources and space and time you have to recover? So I think there's a lot here about role modeling. There's a lot here about reflection. And the last thing I'd probably add is actually if you're in work and you're feeling like your well-being is being attacked, damaged, kind of thing, then look for the early triggers. And the evidence shows that actually there's three areas. There's an area of if you're feeling exhausted, if you feel like you're depersonalizing yourself, you're shrinking back into yourself, and you're not having those social connections you used to have. And the third area is you start having a lack of belief in your own abilities. So if you feel these three things are happening to you, then actually that's early signs that actually you might be just tipping over from coping into a sense of overwhelm or possibly even burnout.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Certainly a lot to think about here. So that concludes this first of 5 videos on the 5 facets of the Sustainable Performance Framework. This one was around building foundations of well-being. We'll come back to the second video, and in that one, we're going to explore enduring well-being practices. Thank you, Anthony, for your time. Thank you for listening, listeners.